Morning and welcome back to News Center. Now, Kenya will tomorrow join the rest of the world in marking the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. The most affected of persons are women and girls. Equality Now is concerned that millions of girls and women are trafficked for sex across the world. Well, let's bring in Anita Nyejong, who is a lawyer and sex trafficking expert from Equality Now, for more details. Anita, thank you so much for joining us on News Center this morning. Tomorrow, the world marks World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. Tell us a little bit about the history of this day.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for having me. My name is Anita. So every year since 2013, the world has been marking the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. So this day has been set aside by the United Nations to commemorate the importance of protection of victims of trafficking.
Right.
The world, the UN particularly, understands the context, the levels of trafficking in persons in the world. It is estimated that approximately 76% of victims of trafficking are women and girls.
Right.
And out of those, 69% of all the forms of trafficking is trafficking for sexual exploitation. Yes.
So let's speak about that a bit. What are the other forms of human trafficking? Sex exploitation is one of them. Forced labor
is another one. Then there's the labor trafficking. There's the organ removal. Then there are other forms of sexual exploitation that comes in the form of forced marriage, child marriage. Are also other forms of trafficking.
Right. So like you mentioned, sex trafficking remains the fastest growing, seemingly becoming like a criminal enterprise in the world. Talk to us about the situation in Kenya, because the coastal region, informal settlements in Nairobi and Kisumu have been termed as hotspots for sex trafficking in the country.
Absolutely. So, sex trafficking happens because so many women and girls are vulnerable, and the vulnerability is a result of gender inequality, as well as systemic challenges, societal challenges that actually push women to be sexually exploited. So, for example, in Kenya we see a lot of women and girls from Western Kenya going to Mombasa and being exploited in the context of tourism. So there's a big tourism, the tourism industry sort of facilitates sexual exploitation of women and girls. And young girls as early as 10 years are being exploited in the expansive prostitution industry in the coast, as well as in Kisumu, for example. So Kenya is one of the countries really that sex trafficking particularly is really high.
I remember a report last year, still by the UN, showing that about 15,000 girls in the coastal region aged between 12 and 18 are sex workers, mainly in sex tourism. But let's talk about Kenya's commitment, especially the government's commitment in enforcing legislation that prevents human trafficking. The U.S. Department of State last year classified Kenya as a source, transit and a destination country for men, women and children subjected to labor and sex trafficking. What are the gaps then that lie in legislation?
So the gaps that lie in legislation is largely around protection of victims. We have the 2010 Anti-Trafficking, Counter-Trafficking Persons Act, which has sort of put in place ensured that the UN Convention on what we call the Palermo Protocol has sort of inculcated into legislation. But one of the challenges that we see is with regard to the protection